Christine, remember when you were a kid and you thought that your career was going to be this like perfect straight line trajectory?
Oh my, yes. That is not at all what happened. It ended up being way more of a squiggle than I could have ever imagined. And I am so happy that I embraced all of the squiggles along the way.
Welcome back, everyone. This is one of those episodes where you are getting me
and me, Kristine.
It is just Colleen and Kristine today. So welcome back, where we are going to kind of talk about so many things today. Kristine and I have a long list. And part of it is, I'm going to just jump right in. Let's forget our little intro here. But
surprise me. Where would you like to start?
Right. And so Kristine and I chat right before we get on here, and we start going down this path of just conversations we've had with coaching clients over the last couple of weeks. It's how we start most of our calls. And today, both of us have run into clients over the past week who are struggling in their careers, struggling in their roles, particularly as these middle manager roles, because leadership is not clear about what the goals are right now.
Yes.
And when leadership isn't clear about the goals, then how the heck can you expect anybody to be clear about what they are doing at work? So let's jump into this whole piece. I know from a Gallup standpoint, they call this role and relationship orientation and clarification, right? Do people know what their job is? What is their North Star? What is their goal? Do people understand what they're supposed to do?
The majority of people don't.
Right. Gallup survey, I will say Gallup surveys say that every month when they come out with that survey, they say it is 1 out of 2 employees are not clear on what they're supposed to do every day.
That's brutal.
50%. Half of your staff have no clue, or maybe they have a kind of idea, but half the people in your organization right now are not clear on what they're going to do.
Unbelievable. And then, I know Gallup also sends out research statistics on employee engagement.
Yeah, right.
So how can you expect your team or your company or your people to be engaged on a daily basis, excited, motivated, finding joy and happiness in this thing we call a job, a career, when you are not providing them with clarity, expectations, direction? Now, that this does not mean, nor is it an invitation to micromanage.
No, it's not that.
Let's just make that clear.
Right. And one of the other interesting parts that came out of it, out of these studies, is Gallup also finds, when folks aren't clear, the amount of safety incidents goes up significantly. So if you're in a workplace where, kind of the physical safety, yes, everybody should be safe at work, but I'm thinking more of things like manufacturing jobs or jobs where there's a physical component to it. These folks also aren't clear on what they're supposed to do every day. And they find when they fix that, the amount of safety incidents plummets, right? It is a much safer workplace when people understand this.
Yes. Well, and this piece came up in conversation yesterday with a client who works for a very large organization, global, and things are changing, which is cool. That's cool, right? Only constant
Rapidly.
Life is change. Awesome, bring it on. And is definitely not afraid of change. However, the other piece that I want to add into this conversation is that he is speaking up and he is giving feedback to senior leadership around what he feels is in the best interest of the business. So he's senior enough, and they are not listening. So I said to him yesterday, there's a difference between hearing and listening. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but clearly they are not listening. And this is starting to really show up in how he's showing up. And he's got a huge team. And there's already been some structural changes, and they brought in a new leader who is not doing a good job. And so this old team of his is now dotted lining themselves to him. And he doesn't have clarity in terms of what his new role is. And this organization does not have a clear vision. And so, I want to bring it around to us now sort of bantering back and forth and maybe offering some guidance to individuals that may find themselves in a similar situation. What can a leader, I actually want to just open this up to either. It doesn't matter if you're senior leadership, brand new manager, or an individual contributor. We all have a voice at the table. And so what guidance would you give somebody who might find themselves in a position where that North Star, that strategic vision, those strategic goals, not even strategic goals, but the things that they're supposed to be working towards are not clear?
And part of this has to go back to your immediate manager, right? Your job, right? You need to get clarity from your immediate manager as to what your job is. Now, depending on where you are in the organization, there may not be clarity, right? You may be in one of those higher level positions and leadership hasn't come out with their strategic plan for the year. I think of, I'm currently coaching someone who's a senior director level, and her vice president has not given her her goals for the year. And it's not the type of organization where she sets her own goals. It's the goals come from on top. And so she's like, yeah, I'm supposed to start these new goals July 1. She's like, I already met all my goals for this year. So at this moment in time, she's like, I'm just kind of trudging along waiting. And she said, most years I don't hear until August or September. So she finds that almost every year that during the summer, she's in this realm of, I already met my goals and I don't know what my new goals are. So I just keep doing what I think I'm supposed to.
Wow.
And it, like, the layering thing gets tricky, right?
Mhm.
Because depending on where you are in that kind of work chart, you might have somebody who is waiting for goals to come down to them, right? But
Mhm.
as any employee, you should be able to sit down with your leader, the person you report to, and say,
Mhm.
okay, what are my goals? And if they aren't set for the year, so I think of this person, right? They're waiting for the president of the company. It's one of those places like the president will set the guidelines for the year. Those will come out. They're supposed to start July 1, but they usually don't come out till like July 15th, right? And then the trickle down effect happens. So people
Yeah.
are late with these things. I get it. It happens. But as her leader, she should be able to sit down with her leader and say, okay, so if this is the case, what are the things I should be working on now to set myself up and our team for success? Right. And you as a leader, if you are in that leadership role, you can't constantly say to folks, I don't know. I don't know what the goals are for this year.
No.
Because even if you don't know what the goals are for this year, you probably have a inkling as to what they are, right? Most companies aren't wildly changing from year to year.
No. So what's coming up for me also is, are the people in these organizations at that level who are supposed to be setting the vision, setting the strategic goals, and then, of course, delivering them down to the various business units, is your strength strategy? Or
Right.
should you be actually leveraging some of your next layer to help set this, who do have strategy and vision and, futuristic or, all the strengths of strategy? It goes back to, you hire people. You shouldn't be hiring people that are a carbon copy of you. You should be looking at what your gaps are and making sure that your next layer fills those gaps.
Right. I was saying, right, don't be well-rounded as an individual. Be well-rounded as a team. Get your team to be well-rounded, but not as
Yes.
a person. Like none of us are good at everything. We are just not.
And I wonder too, and I'm just flicking this out there for discussion, where the procrastination comes from. Is it that you don't know how?
And my guess is it's some of that. And I do know, I think of one small company I'm working with right now. They're only 20 employees. And I work directly with the CEO. And he is saying, right, gosh, with all the tariffs and all the changes that are happening here in the US, and we don't know what's going to happen, that he is very hesitant to put anything out there right now as to this is what we plan on doing for the year. He's like, listen, I know what we're doing this month, and that's about as far as I can take it. And so when folks on his team have his second in command, his chief of staff has futuristic as their top goal, that person is really struggling at the moment because they are future, right? They want to be thinking what's happening 3, 6, 9 months from now. Let's think about what's happening 3, 6, 9 years from now. And at this moment in time here in the US, it's a little tricky. It's a little tricky to figure these things out. And so, but you should be able to go to your leader for guidance about what you need to be doing now.
Yes. Absolutely. Because, I'm just going to bring in the mental health piece. When people come in and they're feeling lost and directionalists, I don't even know, I just made up that word. It can cause that sitting in uncertainty. Now, absolutely, we need to be okay with sitting in discomfort, 100%. Yet, even communicating, here's another angle. Or another thing that I've heard is even if you don't know, communicate that. Communicate that you don't know. The other
and
piece
still, even if you don't know what it's going to look like, still tell people this is what you need to be doing now.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's this is what we're doing now to set ourselves up for success in the future. Whatever it is, people need to know what they are expected to do at work.
Absolutely. And the other piece too is, the vulnerability of if you as a leader are feeling uncertain and a little, unclear of the direction that you are supposed to be moving in, share. Share and just say, like, look, hey, I can empathize. I get it because here's how I'm feeling. And we're in this together, and I will continue to share as I'm updated. But here are my expectations that we just look 4 to 6 weeks out. And it is okay.
And I will say these are tricky moments for leaders, right? It's one of the exercises I do when I'm working with a team of new leaders is we talk about how do you balance the need for transparency and hope at the same time in an organization, right? How do you balance that need for, we want to tell people, like I want to tell people that, right, what's going on, when you also know that right now the thing that people need most at work is hope, and hope translates to the future is going to be better than today. And so when you have these moments where you as a leader are not sure that the future is going to be better than today, it's right. You have to balance that need for transparency and that need for hope for folks. And how you do that is going to be different every time, right? This is why leadership training and leadership development is so important, because if you've done the work and you know how you make decisions and you know how you can strategically look at what's important right now, then you have a better chance of getting there.
Yeah. And as a leader too, a reminder to make sure that you are co-creating a psychologically safe space, because a lot of people will move into a space of being afraid to admit that they don't have anything to do, or a space of, that they're not sure.
Yeah. Or that they're working on the totally wrong thing, right? They don't know what they need to be doing.
Exactly.
Are you solving the wrong problem?
Exactly. And so just, making sure that open, honest, transparent line of communication is there, and that people do feel safe to sit in there, to come to their one-on-one and say, like, look, I do feel lost. Help me.
Yeah.
Help me. Can you help me? Here's where I'm at, or I'm finding that I don't have enough work, or whatever it might be. Be open and honest. You're not going to lose your job. And
I think it's often not even that they don't have enough work. I think it's often people are working on the wrong thing.
They're working on the wrong thing.
They're solving for the wrong problem. They're putting effort into something that the strategy has changed and they don't realize it.
And they don't know. And so
Yeah.
being on, have those check-ins.
Yeah.
It doesn't come across that you need validation or you lack confidence. It is, am I traveling in the right direction?
So I feel like this kind of doubles down on this idea in a slightly different way. But so we've been doing the confident manager cohort, and
Right.
in it last week, somebody said, if you come in as a new leader in an organization, how soon should you start to make changes? And it was one of the best conversations that this group has had, because we started down the path of it's really important to listen when you first come in as a leader. And I don't care if you're the leader at the top of the organization, you're the president, or you're coming into a new role with a small team, right? That's lower in the organization on the org plan, right? But when new leaders come in, if they make change immediately, right, they are seen as someone who hasn't listened. They haven't figured out who the team is. Like, how could you possibly come up with all of these new changes before you actually know who we are? And you get the chance that people are going to leave. Now, on the flip side, the person who brought this question up actually was because they are working for a leader who's been there for 13 months. So they've been there slightly over a year.
Yes.
And the person said, I'm taking my first year to really learn this company, learn this business. And most of the people kept saying, okay, like 6 months in, you should have been able to start making decisions. You should have right? And now she kept saying a year, and a year's happened and they haven't made any large changes.
Okay.
And I think people were hoping for that, right? Sometimes you get a new leader and you're hoping like everything's great and it stays the same.
Yes.
This is a company where they know there are large changes in their industry, and they know they need to make changes if they are going to stay relevant.
Okay.
And everybody's sitting around going, gosh, I wish this leader would make some decisions and make some changes. And it was such an interesting conversation, because I don't think there's a set answer, right, as to how long. But I was, listening to this conversation, I was like, oh, yeah, 13 months does seem like a really long time to just listen, right, as a new leader. So when you've coached people who've gone into leadership roles, how long are you suggesting to them that they spend? I always called it like my listening tour, right? When you get moved up to a leadership, like how long is the listening tour? And at what point do you start suggesting changes? And at what point do you start mandating changes?
I think the listening tour never really ends, first of all. It's not like
True.
Right.
But I think there's
I
also
know.
that beginning listening tour. Like, I need to understand the company before I make decisions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't think it ever ends. I think it changes. The listening
Yes.
tour changes. There you go. That's a better way of responding. I feel like it's different. There isn't going to be a set recipe to say, like, this is where. Now, number one, it does go back to knowing what the 30, 60, 90-day expectations are from your leader as a new manager. I also feel like you can suggest changes at any time. And I'm going to sort of connect it back to the confident manager, like you've taken on a role, you've got the skills and experience, you've been brought in for a reason. If you have done your due diligence in terms of the role and what you're being brought in to execute, deliver, whatever it is, that changes can begin to take place at any time. Now, you're telling me that somebody is holding back after 13 months. There's more shit going on there below the surface. Like, I'm going to call it. Like, there's something going on there. If this manager has...
I'm sure it's a confidence issue. Like, I wish I could actually
100%.
coach their manager to say, okay, right.
What is going on?
You've listened
What's
enough.
holding...
Right, you've listened
What's
enough.
holding you back?
Time to actually execute on some things.
Exactly. Are they in under over? Like, who knows, right? I mean, there could be a million different reasons that's why they're getting in their own way. So, I know I've kind of given you a bit of a wishy-washy answer because I don't want people to think that they have to go in. But I would say, like, if I had to blanket a number, between 3 to 6 months, you should be stepping up.
Yeah, that was the answer that I gave. I actually said,
Yeah.
right after 3 months.
Look at
right,
us
look at
on the
us,
same page.
totally on sync, right?
Yeah,
I always
totally
say,
unscripted, people. Totally unscripted.
right after 3 months, you should have enough of a sense of the company. And yes, I get there are companies that definitely have annual cycles, and maybe you haven't seen everything. But after 3 months, you should be good, and you should know enough if you've really truly done some good listening to be able to turn around and say, all right, team, here are the things that I think I need to implement, and also get some feedback still, because maybe there's something you don't know, right? Maybe something happens in July every year that you have no idea it's going to happen and nobody ever told you.
I always say you're as good as you're as good as your last gig, and B, you're as good as the people that you're surrounded by. And I think that's the other thing. Here's, myth of leadership is that you need to come in and know everything. Bullshit.
No, nobody does.
Nobody does. Oh my God. And honestly, like, being vulnerable and open and saying, look, I got a lot to learn here. And and here's how you can support my onboarding. I just had an onboarding conversation with somebody, and as a new manager, a new leader, bring your people in. Bring your people in and be a part. Just because you're your leader or HR or whatever the process is in your company, here are the steps you need to take to onboard. Bring your team in. Here's what I need. Here's how you can support my onboarding. What am I missing? Asking these open-ended, powerful, vulnerable questions is going to actually probably expedite you. And, get your team's input, especially if they've been there. Just because they're an individual contributor doesn't mean they're out to lunch. They're probably sitting there quietly with I'm really swearing today, a shit ton of intel that could be so useful. We might get an R rating on this episode. That would be fun for us. Anyways, and that's the thing is, step into your power and ask questions and get the right people sitting at the table to allow you to start to implement change within 3 to 6 months. And it doesn't have to be everything.
Right. And the willingness to say, I don't know. Right. I don't know.
God. I don't know.
I was talking about this with somebody who was interviewing for a C-suite level position 2 weeks ago. And I told them the best thing because she said, what do I do if they ask a question that I don't have an answer to?
Awesome.
And I said, first, don't start rambling, right? Because as a senior leader, one of the best things you could do is pause. Take a few seconds to show that you're actually thinking about this, and then come with your answer. And you might even say, gosh, it's a really great question. Give me a second. Let me think about it.
Yeah.
Take a second. And maybe you come back and you say, you know what? I actually don't know an answer to that. Like, here are the things I need to do in order to get there.
Yeah.
Here's the information I want to gather before I can make that decision. So that way we're making a great decision together, right? That doesn't show that you don't know what you're doing or you don't know what you're talking about. It shows the opposite. It shows that you care enough and you're smart enough to know you don't know everything, and that you care enough to go get the right information and not make a decision only having, half the info.
It's showcasing your thought process.
Yes. Right. It's why companies ask those stupid questions like, hey, Kristine, how many ATMs are there in New York City? And you're like, what? Like, I know many people who've gotten that question or a very similar one. No company actually cares how many ATMs there are in New York City or whatever it is they're asking you. What they want to hear is your thought process. How are you going to figure this out? They don't want an answer. They don't want you to say, I'm just going to Google it and get the answer. That is not what they're looking for. They're looking to understand, how do you make decisions?
Yeah.
And so I always tell folks, if you're going on an interview, well, one, you have to understand how you make decisions. If you don't know how you make decisions,
Hire a coach.
hire a
Figure
coach.
it out.
Yep, have
Hire
someone
a coach.
hire a coach. Or do some assessments, like do some things to help you figure out how do you make decisions, and then be really clear about how you communicate that. Right. There are people who are super analytical, right? They make decisions
Yes.
based on all the data. And there are people who make decisions based on gut instinct or who the people are involved, right? There's so many different ways that you can approach
Oh,
this.
yeah.
Just know how you do it for you.
Most of my clients don't know how they think. So that brings us into a total other topic, and we may or may not want to go down this rabbit hole, but I was hanging out with a friend a couple weeks ago, and I don't know about you, Colleen, but in this instance, he wanted to share his performance review with me because, those are the types of conversations I tend to sometimes have with humans.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
so anyways, bless his heart, he wanted to, I think he was just debriefing it himself. Anyways,
Right.
and that was something that he brought up, and he said, my leader brought up, I don't speak up in meetings. And I was so like, I could feel it. I could feel it inside of me. I was like, I need to get a hold of this leader. Like, no, that is not a good piece of feedback. And I just want to say, and I gave him this feedback. I said, kudos for you for standing up and somewhat pushing back and saying, just because I'm not speaking up doesn't mean I'm not engaged, I'm not present, I'm not taking it in. He needs to take in and leave and process. He said 9 times out of 10, I'm halfway back to my desk after a meeting, and I go, and he goes and he circles back and shows up at his manager's door.
And
I
truthfully,
said,
this goes back to, right, how are you setting people up for success in your meetings who have different learning and thinking styles, right?
exactly,
Are you
leaders.
sending people the information beforehand? Are you sending an agenda? Are you sending, here's the report to read? Or, right, if we're talking
Exactly.
budget, are you sending the budget from this year and last year so people
Yes.
have a chance
Can
to
prepare.
absorb it? Because not everybody is a show up, think on their feet person, right? As
Exactly.
Kristine and I are snapping if you can't hear it over our microphones.
I know.
Right. Not
It's-
everybody is that. And people have so many different learning styles. And so
Yes.
think about, are you setting up your leaders for success? And if you're having a diverse team, if you are not hiring copycats of you, then that
Yes.
means most people in that room are going to have a different thinking and learning style than you.
You need to get to know your team, individual contributor, managers. I don't care what their title is. The humans on your team, you need to take the time to get to know their operating system. And, the invitation is to everybody else out there, and I'm not plugging Colleen and I here. Work with a coach to get to know what your operating system is, and again, I'm going to just highlight, how do you communicate? How do you receive communication? Do you have introverted characteristics, extroverted characteristics, thought process? Understand, because it's not just going to benefit you in your current role. It's also going to benefit you in terms of if you are looking for promotions, if you are looking for growth opportunities, you will need to sit across from somebody and share examples, career stories as to how you go about showing up in your everyday. And it is so important as a leader to understand your people, because if you are not giving them the space to show up authentically, then what happens, now I'm getting into the whole neuroscience piece, is you're actually shifting that person into a space of stress.
Yep.
And I think if I say the collective you as leaders knew that is potentially the impact that you're having on your team, I would really hope that you stop and pause and really think about what feedback and what observations are you giving someone. I had another client recently tell me that she had feedback that she wasn't creative. she actually went and did strength finders. No, not strength finders. Sorry. I'm going to never get that right.
Clifton Strengths.
Anyways,
That's
Clifton
okay.
Strengths. She actually went and did it. And she had, like, that wasn't a strength. And so, meanwhile, she has been walking around thinking that this was, you know, a negative. I was like, it's not a strength of yours. That's okay. Let's,
Right.
you know, her strengths were very dominated in relationship building.
And I think it's one of those things that part of the responsibility is on you as an individual to actually know this about you. And it's
Yes.
also your responsibility to communicate what you need,
Yeah.
right? Because if you are not able to say to folks, this is how I operate, this is what I bring to the table, this is where you get
Yes.
the best of me,
Yes.
right? This is what I need in order to be successful. Now,
Yes.
I will also say there is not the expectation out there in the world that every single person is going to give you exactly what you need to be successful.
No.
Every place is not going to be the right place for every person. And, you know, there are going to be times that you're going to work for a leader that you're like, they are a terrible fit for me. But you know what? They might be a great fit for Kristine, right?
Yeah.
Or right, vice versa. So it's not a failure when it doesn't work, right? We could take it back to interviewing. You know, I so often will have people come to me and say, gosh, I don't know what to say on an interview because I hated my manager, I hated the company, I hated my job, and I quit before I was fired, right? I've heard that so often, right? I quit before they could fire me, so I didn't have to be fired. And you're like, okay, that sucks. They're like, and now what do I say on an interview? And I'm like, I mean, you don't want to walk into an interview and be like, I quit before I was fired. But every single human on this planet has worked for someone who is not a good fit for them.
Not a good fit.
Right. And okay, maybe there's a handful of people who've only worked for great leaders. Most of us have worked at some point in our careers for someone who wasn't a great fit. And so to be able to confidently say that, to say, right, gosh, I was working for Kristine, and you know what? We just had such different views on work and how work happens. I realized this was just not the right place for me. And so I left. And I also tell folks the best line you can say there is, I was lucky enough to be in the position to be able to leave, right? Because it changes the tone of that conversation from,
beautiful.
oh my God, like this is so horrible, I can't believe you had to quit, to, wow, look at you being so lucky to quit. I'm jealous. I'd love to be able to quit my job if it didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So.
absolutely. And to add to that, I think that's just like gold right there, Colleen. And to add to that is, if you need to take some time or just bring into your awareness what negativity you could be hooked into, please don't go out to market. Don't go out having the networking conversations or being reactive in terms of like, I got to get out of here. And then you start spewing your resume and you go into the interview process. Your vibe is going to give it off that something's not right. And so take some time. You know, if it's working with a coach, therapy, whatever it might be, please don't go into job search when you're like at rock bottom. This, you know, and now I'm bringing another topic in that perhaps you and I can go down the rabbit hole in another episode. You know, we don't always have the luxury of going out on top, but be mindful of waiting too long and then being reactive, because I can guarantee 11 years in recruitment and you and I combined 50-something years in the world of career, we have had conversations where people have reactively made a move and it was a shit move.
Oh, yeah.
And
I've done it.
6 months later, you're like, F me.
Right. Well, and truthfully,
This is not any better.
And there are times you have to, right? Because of life circumstances, there are times that you're going to be making those moves and not the best circumstance. But get it in your head right away that it's a leapfrog job, right? You have to tell anybody this, but I'd taken leapfrog jobs where I needed to get out of one situation because of multiple reasons. At that time, it was a combination of getting divorced, my kid going to a new school, having to move. Like there were so many things that were happening that made me have to leave that job. And so I went into a role that wasn't great. Like, I knew on day one, this was not going to be a long-term job for me,
Mm-hmm.
but it was what I needed right then. And when I got to that job, I could take a few deep breaths. I could get a little bit settled. And 3 months in, I started building that network to make the next career move. So you can do that. And right, we
Be
know
strategic.
right, just be strategic about it. Right, there was definitely, like, that was a time frame that there was no chance I could take time off between jobs, that I couldn't take time to sit around and kind of think about what was kind of a great thing, because I had a toddler. And right, I was like, there was no chance that I could do any of those things. So I did the best I could. And right, do that for yourself. Fake it on the interview if you have to. Get out of the bad circumstance, and then take those deep breaths and start that process for yourself.
I mean, what we're essentially doing is giving people permission to make a squiggle that makes sense for them.
Yep.
And know that that squiggle is not, it doesn't have to be your forever job. It's not your forever job. And when you can look at it through that lens of, I need to make some changes to accommodate where I'm at, my chapter, life is happening, et cetera, and you know that you're going to then put a plan in place to squiggle back in the direction that you know you want to continue taking your career, hopefully that is going to just lighten the load for people out there that might be sitting in a place of like, shit, how do I get out of this?
Yeah.
Because it's doable. And if you can look at it from an impermanent perspective, you know, hopefully that will give you some guidance and some confidence to know that you can squiggle back or you can squiggle again, whatever, you know, whatever your circumstance might be. It doesn't have to be forever. There are no forever jobs anymore. I mean,
Nope.
okay, there you go. That could be our next conversation. I don't know.
There aren't. 100%.
There's about 10 more episodes that just came out of this conversation.
Okay, Kristine. Oh,
Yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah.
You know, just to somebody out there, something in our banter today.
All right, so I'm going to jump into some of our quick questions that we always ask people at the end of ours for us both to answer.
Really?
Just for fun at the moment.
Okay.
What are you binging or streaming on TV these days?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No. I'm
Wow.
too busy riding my bike.
All right, I will say my daughter was just home for
Okay.
3 weeks before she left. She left to go back to Ohio for an internship. But we watched Sirens on Netflix. I believe. I'm 99% sure it was on Netflix. But at the new one with Kevin Bacon.
Okay.
And
I'll watch that when I go back to California in November. I'll put that on my list.
it was definitely interesting. Yeah. I still don't know how I feel about many of the characters. So if you have watched Sirens, drop it in our comments this week because
I love it.
I think it's interesting.
I'll drop it. Yep. Put it on my list. I don't even have a Netflix subscription. How about that?
Look at that. All right. So how about, here's my other one. What are some of your go-to pump-up songs? Like what's you're getting to go do a keynote. What are you going to run onto stage singing? Or playing? I will say, I'll go first. I'll give you a chance to think about it. Right? The ones that I tend to
I know
use
where I'm going.
are
Yeah.
This Is Me by Kesha. Tends
Okay.
to be definitely a top one on my list. I'm looking at my list that I have. I actually have a particular list that I bring up when I am in a conference that I talk about. It is my Embrace the Squiggle list. I will
Okay, well,
also say the other one is You're on Your Own Kid by Taylor Swift. So,
Oh, I like that one. Okay, I'm not going to give you songs. I'll give you artists. Totally obsessed with Taylor Swift. Yeah, 100%. I'm a Swiftie now. When I was in California a few weeks ago, the 80s tunes on Alexa was playing. That's all Alexa played was 80s tunes.
Yep.
And my God, did that pump me up on many different levels. Just like Journey, and oh my God, there were just so many that came on that were so like took me back.
Nice.
So that, and I will also say this is more for the bike. Meatloaf.
Nice. I could see that friend on the bike. 100%.
I freaking love Meatloaf. There is something about that artist that just like makes me pedal fast.
All right, I'm going to end today with these have not shown up in my TikTok or Reels feed yet, but they were all over my husband's, and he was showing them to me last night, and I was laughing so hard that I was crying. Because when you said 80s music, it made me think of Aha, Take On Me. And so if you look up LinkedIn profiles read to 80s or 90s songs, there's a guy who looks up names of people on LinkedIn and does them. He did a few with Pearl Jam, which was also amazing. And so he puts them up, and it sounds like the person singing is reading those names. It is the funniest thing that you've ever seen in your life. So LinkedIn profiles to 80s or 90s songs. That's what we're going to leave you with today. And you're welcome.
I don't even know how to search that. Do I use AI?
On whatever platform you're watching Reel. So Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, doesn't matter. It's on all of them. Like I said, laughing so hard, like water was coming out my nose. Funniest thing I've seen in a long time. So with that, thank you everybody for joining us today. Right. If you are listening to this, we're always looking for new guests. If you have some ideas for someone, drop off a message. Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, all the above. Right. I've gotten a few messages this past week from 3 different people who were like, hey, I'd love to be a guest. So we'll be reaching out to you all and seeing if this is a good fit for you.
We do.
So
have
remember,
fun.
We definitely show up for the messy and the nonlinear parts of our lives. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Love it. Great conversation.
Is it time for you to add a little squiggle to your career? Join us every week to hear from another guest talk about how they embrace the squiggle.
Subscribe now and find your inspiration.